What was the creepiest thing someone said on the first date? Friend told me the guy not only asked for a selfie, but posted on Facebook with the caption "My queen." First time meeting. Jon Snow's at it again. Bend the knee. I want you to carve your initials on my thigh with a knife. She was very serious. Well, how else are you supposed to carve your initials on her thigh? Ballpoint pen and time. Called their mom in front of me to say they met a real winner and how they were done with their ex. Not sure if this counts, but it was really uncomfortable. That happened on a first date. Wow. That sounds incredibly awkward. Yay. Never called the guy again because I was so weirded out. I don't blame you. Yikes. Poor guy had to call his mom and tell her he was wrong again. Mid-date he placed his hand on my stomach and said my son will grow here. I love Asian girls. They remind me of children. Apostrophe. That isn't a red flag. That's a red banner. It's not a red flag. It's a red light. Then a blue light. Then red again. Then blue. And a loud wee woo noise. Showed me a long list on her phone of, if I can guess without exaggeration, at least 60 to 70 baby names for when she has a kid, and joked about having baby fever. They were all really country bumpkin names like Brecken and Gatlin too, which somehow made it more unpalatable for me. Edit. She's only 21. I don't blame you for breaking up with her. You wouldn't have Gatlin along with her too well. I invited my ex to join us for lunch. WTF. And did the ex show up? She did show up. We went to McDonald's. The ex was really nice and tried to make things less awkward. She didn't know it was a date. She thought she was just meeting with her ex for lunch, and she was shocked that I was there whilst my date was in the bathroom. The ex confided in me that she was hoping to get back together. I told her that's fine because I had no interest whatsoever at this point. There was no second date and those two ended up back together a few weeks later. Edit to explain more. We met at his house first, and he was taking me out to lunch somewhere surprise. I didn't know it was McDonald's until we pulled into the car park. He didn't mention having invited his ex until we were already there, and she showed up soon after. I would have left before she got there, but he took me there in his car, and it would have been quite an expensive taxi back to his house to get my car. After lunch he took me back to his house and the ex came in the car too. He tried to put a movie on, but I insisted on leaving. He then took my car keys off the bench and locked himself in his bedroom while he hid them from me. I did get a bit scared at this point. His housemate helped me find my keys while my date started the movie with his ex, and I left without saying anything more. Okay. That is weird as hell. Bullet dodged by the sound of it though. Not that weird. He was probably just trying to make the ex jealous, and it worked. It's still weird. It's so unbelievably rude and awkward that it's borderline pathetic. Want to make your ex jealous? Go to the gym. Show up with hot new partners at the places you normally hang out. Post pics now and then on social media if you're into that sort of thing. Definitely don't invite your ex to your first date with a stranger at McDonald's. Good God. Can I cut you and drink it? She was serious. He was in the military, Canadian. I asked him if he ever did any volunteer work overseas with the military and he said, no. I joined the military to kill people, not to help people. Apostrophe. Chugged my beer and got out of there as fast as I could. That sounds like the kind of guy who would get a dishonorable discharge as soon he left boot camp, and then would brag how he's a veteran flashing his obviously fake medals. Sounds like the kind of guy that talks himself up then fakes an injury during boot camp so he can keep all the benefits and not have to do shit. This guy wasn't talking at all, and I only brought a few talking points cause normally they talk the whole time. I didn't have anything else to say and asked him to start talking and he said, what I want to talk about can't be said in public. When I ended the date he thought we were going to go to my place to talk and I said no. I got in my car, noted what car he got into, and took a few breaths to calm down. I looked around and his car was still there. I waited 30 minutes before he left the parking lot and stayed another 15 before I left. You never know. Maybe he was gonna tell you about his superhero alter ego /s. But seriously, that is a red banner, and whoever he is, I'm glad you dodged that bullet. It wasn't something that someone said, but he stole my credit card out of my purse when I wasn't looking. Luckily on the way home I stopped for coffee and noticed it was missing. Froze the account that second. Yikes, I had like the opposite thing happen. It wasn't a first date, but a third date. We went to a fair together, and I didn't want to bring my purse with because we planned to go on rides. I asked if I could put my debit card in his wallet. At the end of the date I forgot to take it back, but just as I was about to drive away he ran back to the car and gave it to me. He was really nice about it and was like, OMG, you almost forgot this! Exclamation mark. Exclamation mark. Would you have been okay? Question mark? Question mark? Question mark? Now I wouldn't make a mistake that stupid, and I'm really glad he was a good dude. Based on your first sentence, I figured this would be a story about you stealing some guy's credit card. Within knowing each other about an hour he told me he had never wanted kids before, but the moment we met he felt it biologically. Then he told me he wanted to be my son's stepfather as well. I felt something reading that. Not what he said, but what he did. He ducking stole my keys while I was out of the room and took off into the night. We had an hours long standoff where he wouldn't answer my calls or texts begging him to return them. I stood by his truck that was parked a few blocks away making sure that he didn't leave with them. Eventually he dropped them off in my car and I got a ride home from the cops. Honestly, one of the scariest episodes of my life. Dude. WTF. This is a nice place. I've seen you eating here before. Apostrophe. This can be fairly casual to super creepy entirely depending on tone context though. It was their kitchen. This can be fairly casual to super creepy entirely depending on tone context though. I told this guy I played the piano, and like half an hour later he said, if I wanted you to always remember me, I'd break your ring fingers. You know, cause they don't heal well, and then you'd always think of me when playing. Apostrophe. Suffice to say, I left the restaurant fairly quickly. Good god, what a horrific thought to have. And then to decide it was a good idea to vocalize that. I hope you never had the misfortune of seeing him again. Look, this has to go well. Both of my brother's wives are pregnant with their second children. Do not let me down. Said to me within 3 minutes of sitting down. Could it have been a joke? The words read like a joke, but I guess it's all in the delivery. I thought it was a joke at first and tried to awkwardly laugh it off, but the tone of his voice was something it never heard before. He also didn't blink much and he had the most intense, intimidating stare, like he was trying to make me break down and confess my darkest secrets right there at the table. Some other things were said, mainly pertaining to his occupation, that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Looking back now, I feel like there's a 99% chance he was doing abusive, illegal shit at his job, and whatever he was doing would have impacted a ton of people for life. Went out with a girl one night, and after dinner she drove me up into the mountains. I was new to the area, and after a while, when there were no more lights, she started talking about serial killers. I still remember her saying I used to think about getting away with stuff like that sometimes. I guarantee that all these true crime obsessed people couldn't actually get away with a crime. They usually think about it in incredible detail that they'll forget about the major obvious things. My son is gonna love having you around. Lady, we talked twice on Tinder and I've only known you for 5 minutes. He's up on the stepdaddy talk. Full disclosure. Not long after I met a nice woman with 3 children. I adopted all 3 not long after we married. I met her on Tinder. I think that means the first lady was correct. She did the mistake of only having 1 child. When we get married I can wear this dress. First date went back to her place, and while giving me the tour she pulled a beautiful wedding dress out of a closet and said this to me while holding it up to her body. You called it beautiful. You noticed. You noticed the dress. You're the one. It's meant to be. Do you gain weight easily? Why do you want to ask that? Question mark? Question mark? Elmo. It puts the lotion on its skin. Don't worry, I'm not a serial killer. To be fair, I make jokes like this, but definitely not until someone gets to know me. You look just like my sister. And later in the date he admitted that's something he liked about me. Needless to say, no second date with Jaime Lannister. This one made me laugh. And also that guy was gross. It's so ducked up. You almost have to laugh about it in retrospect. Noped out Tada really quick. After I heard that though, I would probably have done my nervous shocked guffaw that I used to do when I was younger and would find myself in bad spots. Then I'd have noped right out there too. I went on a date with my cousin's coworker who I met really quickly once and thought was cute. When we sat down at dinner he started talking about his job and he told me he holds his pee all day because he felt weird taking bathroom breaks around the guys at work. This one is just kinda gross and a bit funny lol, unless I'm missing something. This one isn't really creepy. I love you. I love you too. Username has relevance here. He insisted he drive me to the movie theater, which meant he would have to drive to my town 45 minutes away, back to his town, to go to the theater, then back to my town to drop me off. I said I didn't understand why I wouldn't just drive to the theater myself to save the multiple trips. When I adamantly refused a ride he still drove to my town, bought me a coffee and still insisted I go in his car. I still said no, citing the fact that it would be dangerous for me to get into a vehicle with a person I didn't know, and I drove myself to the theater, where I had a friend meet me for the movie. The guy still came with us to the movie and even paid for me despite me telling him I didn't think it was a good idea, never spoke to him again, and blocked his number. I sincerely hope you left the theater before the movie was over. I had a friend meet me there before we even went in, so I wouldn't be alone. And this guy still insisted he pay for my ticket, even though it was obvious I was not interested. After the movie I even had to tell him more than once that he could leave as I was going to stay with my friend. It was such a sketchy experience. And luckily I have good friends. He asked me if I'd rather go on a cruise or to a resort for our honeymoon. Then sent me a text later to tell me he showed one of his clients my picture and the client told him his girlfriend was pretty. Yikes. This was in the early zeros when I agreed to go on a date with a persistent coworker at Target. He showed up to my house with a giant bouquet of flowers. My parents invited him in to check him out and spoke with him for a bit. His story didn't really check out. As a volunteer firefighter I flew to help on 9/11 from Syracuse. No flights obviously happened. But then all of a sudden they pulled out a disposable camera. When my mom asked him what it was for, he said CHS 135 is going on vacation for a week and I want a picture to remember her by, and like from a dark comedy. We then heard the click of the shutter. I faked being suddenly sick and my mom told him I wasn't feeling well. Luckily it was only a summer job. So this dude and I kept randomly being on the same bus. We would never talk, but make eyes. A few months into this, we get off at the main bus hub and he approaches me and invites me to dinner. There was a teriyaki place right across the street. So we went and had good conversation. I had a good time. When it came to separating ways, it wasn't what he said per se, but the fact that he brought up his hand and cupped my cheek. He just sorta left it there in silence, and then slowly grazed his fingers down along my face as he pulled away. He was trying way too hard to make it like a movie scene. Yeah, seems like he took pointers from how people act in cinema. Probably hasn't been on a date before or not very much experience in real world dating. This is a bit more cringy than creepy. The guy knew I like dogs and did volunteer work, so he tried to make a joke, oh we have something in common, then I volunteer to put dogs to sleep at the pound. Either he have a creepy sense of humor or legit didn't knew what put to sleep was a euphemism for. They used to be a Wiccan and kept their clipped toenails / fingernails in a bag under their bed. One of these things is not like the other. IKR. Toenails and fingernails should be in separate bags. They didn't say anything. It's what they did that creeped me out. They kept taking pictures of me when I wasn't looking. The only reason I knew this was because the first picture they took, they didn't shut the shutter sound off. Hey PSSST. Please subscribe and like.